All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at what I honestly think is the ultimate business comeback story. We're talking about a product that went from a massive billion-dollar boom straight to the brink of total collapse, only to pull off one of the most unbelievable resurrections in modern corporate history. Yes, this is the story of that bulbous, brightly colored foam clog that was literally named one of the ugliest things ever made, yet somehow managed to take over the world. And not just once, but twice. The stakes here are incredibly high, and the business lessons we're going to unpack are absolutely vital for anyone curious about how companies actually survive and thrive against all odds. Okay, let's dive into this. The penny stock punchline. 2009, the darkest hour. So we're going to start right in the middle of the chaos at the exact moment when the entire world thought this company was completely finished. Picture this, it's 2009. The shoe the whole world just spent 3 years laughing at is about to have the last laugh taken away from it entirely. Crocs is nearly bankrupt. The stock has completely collapsed from its meteoric highs, plunging straight down into penny stock territory. I mean, warehouses are absolutely stuffed to the brim with unsold inventory. Management had basically burned through piles of cash, opening up all these retail stores and buying up other companies at the exact moment the global economy fell off a cliff into the 2008 financial crisis. So bankruptcy wasn't just a rhetorical question anymore, it was a bleak, looming reality. Right on cue, business writers all over the globe were eagerly drafting the company's obituary. The verdict was pretty much unanimous. It was a fad, just like Pet Rock's on Pogs, a shoe that was always destined to end up in the clearance bin of history. But here is the massive mystery we're going to unravel today. How on earth did this widely mocked foam clog not only survive this absolute disaster, but come back a decade later bigger, cooler, and infinitely more profitable? Let's move to and see how this builds. Lighting the foam fuse, the accidental discovery. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the material itself. To really understand the collapse and the comeback, we have to rewind to the very beginning, far, far away from any high-fashion runway. The story actually starts back in 2002. Three friends in Boulder, Colorado, Duke Hansen, Scott Siemens, and George Bodecker Jr. basically stumbled upon a secret weapon. Scott had found this remarkable foam resin material developed by a Canadian company. The trio licensed it, refined it, and called it Crosslight. This stuff was feather-light, totally waterproof, naturally odor-resistant, and it cushioned your foot like absolutely nothing else on the market. When they molded it into a boating shoe they called the beach clog, well, it was, by any conventional standard, hideous. But that Crosslight material made it shockingly comfortable. They took this incredibly ugly but highly functional shoe to the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show in 2002. They brought 200 pairs, and they literally sold every single one. Right there, they thought they had a nice little niche product for sailors and gardeners. But what they really had was a lit fuse. The explosion in popularity was just breathless and totally uncontrolled. First, chefs discovered them because, working 12-hour shifts on concrete floors will make you forgive absolutely any aesthetic. Then nurses followed, then kids, then, inexplicably, absolutely everyone. Look at this timeline. By 2005, revenue topped $108 million. In 2006, Crocs went public in what was then the largest footwear IPO in history. And by 2007, revenue had rocketed past $800 million. But of course, that leads us here, the fad crests, scaling for the sky. This phenomenal overnight success actually planted the seeds for a massive catastrophe. Flush with all that growth and a mountain of IPO cash, Crocs expanded aggressively on every axis all at once. They opened their own retail stores by the hundreds. They acquired other brands. They launched new product lines far, far away from their core clog. They scaled their factories and their inventory for a demand curve that was pointing straight at the sky. So the crucial point is the fatal hubris hiding in their internal assumption. They actually believed the boom was permanent. But the harsh reality? Fads crest. And this novelty wore off exactly as the 2008 financial crisis hit, which caused consumer discretionary spending to just vanish overnight. Suddenly, you've got Crocs as a company built for $1 billion of demand, but facing only a tiny fraction of it. The symptoms were brutal. We're talking heavy corporate debt, hundreds of empty retail stores just bleeding rent, literal mountains of unsold foam clogs, and a stock price in absolute freefall. This really highlights one of the oldest and most dangerous patterns in business. The boom didn't just precede the bust, it caused it. They had mistakenly scaled their costs to match their absolute best year instead of a realistic, sustainable one. Which brings us to the hardest part, retreating to the core, the gritty turnaround. With the company basically on life support, the tone had to shift from reckless expansion to steady, deliberate survival. Turnaround executive John Durden took the helm, and he brought in the least glamorous, most unsexy playbook imaginable, a pure strategy of controlled retreat. Step 1, close down those underperforming stores. Step 2, radically cut costs and burn through that mountain of excess inventory. Step 3, use whatever cash is left to pay down the crushing corporate debt. And finally, and most importantly, refocus the entire company on the one single thing that had always actually worked, the core clog and the comfort story behind it. No more pretending to be a diversified fashion house. And you know what? This gritty, boring playbook worked. It stabilized the company throughout the 2010s, slowly returning them to steady profitability, all while the broader world still thought of them as a forgotten punchline. But then, something crazy happened. The billion-dollar joke. The cultural flip. In the late 2010s, global fashion's relationship with irony completely flipped. Suddenly, ugly became interesting and comfort became cool. So instead of running from the joke, Crocs leaned directly into it. High-profile collaborations turned the shoe into a literal canvas, from Balenciaga runways to musicians like Post Malone and Justin Bieber. On top of that, they leaned heavily into Jibbitz charms, turning every single pair into a personalized, customizable statement piece. The brand went from being knocked to genuinely desirable for a whole new generation that prized authenticity over polish. And then, the pandemic hit. With the entire world working from home and desperately in search of comfort, it poured absolute rocket fuel on a fire that was already burning. And this brilliantly illustrates the stunning financial result of that cultural flip. Compare their original fad-era peak in 2007, where they hit $800 million, to their record revenue in 2021, roughly $2.3 billion. The comeback was nearly 3 times larger than the original boom. Today, they're this multi-billion-dollar juggernaut, sold in over 85 countries, boasting some of the best profit margins in the entire footwear industry. So what does this all mean for us? Masterclass in business cycles, the core takeaways. Underneath all the brightly colored foam, this story really is a masterclass in business cycles. Let's distill this epic narrative down to the core lessons you need to take away from this explainer. First off, fast success creates a unique danger when you scale faster than your foundation can support. Remember, the near death of Crocs wasn't caused by making an ugly shoe. It was caused by mistaking a fad's peak for a permanent plateau. Second, turnarounds don't usually come from clever new products. They require the extreme discipline to retreat to your core. Third, reinvention is entirely possible, even for products the world has completely written off. I mean, the very same shoe that was laughed out of the room in 2008 was worn on high-fashion runways a decade later. And finally, financial discipline matters most during the good times, because by the time a crisis actually arrives, the decisions that determine whether you survive or die have already been made. Ultimately, what this shows us is that being called the worst invention of your era doesn't mean you can't have the last laugh, provided you have the grit to survive long enough to get it. This comeback doesn't happen if 3 friends in Boulder were too embarrassed to sell an ugly shoe that actually worked. And it certainly doesn't happen if the company just accepted the world's verdict that the joke was over. The overarching lesson here was never really about shoes. It's that surviving your worst chapter, retrenching, refocusing, and absolutely refusing to disappear sets up a second act that can be significantly bigger than anything in the first. So, I want to leave you with this thought. The biggest leaps usually start with the smallest, shakiest first step. What will yours be? If this deep dive into resilience and reinvention inspired you, stick around. This channel exists to bring you real stories of people and ideas that started long before the world ever gave them permission to. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next explainer.